Northview School right on Shooting Park Road. And they got down to 2 campuses. So it's kind of that model that the board is interested in. I don't want to confuse you because the 35 million does what the proposition says. The intent, so if you go back to the motion that I read to you, remember the motion said look for alternative financing? This would be that alternative financing that we don't know for sure when it would come. If it comes in the next 5 years, wonderful. Because we can go over to Douglas and literally, other than in window air conditioning units, we can take the surveillance. We can take many of the improvements that we made there and use them in the new facility. Now I will tell you, if it doesn't come for 10 years, believe it or not, as you know with the technology, that equipment is probably going to not be current enough anymore. It's about 5 or 6 years that the technology really needs to kind of, especially for school safety and things like that. So that phase 2, we want to be careful talking about that because I don't want to clutter the voters' mind and confuse them, but that's the rationale that the board had for going here. Now, why didn't the board go, well, why didn't you build it, kindergarten through 4th grade building? And because junior highs are awfully expensive to build. Yeah, they are. The reason the board didn't go there is because the capital construction money that will come probably won't be enough to build a brand new junior high. What it would do is demolish Douglas and put those students over at Jefferson. Hopefully for the tune of a total of $35 million as opposed to the $59 million that was going to get to one campus. And then the last sentence is obviously and to issue the bonds to pay the $35 million. So to get into the financing, and I'm almost finished here, and I appreciate patience with me, but I want to try to be as clear as I can. It's a 20-year term, the bond. In other words, it's like a mortgage for 20 years. And the numbers that we published with the media and the board has used is based on today's interest rates. We have to use a real number and what we know now. The board has also asked that we not calculate in those estimates any property growth or property development in our community. Currently, over the last 20 years, believe it or not, in Princeton, our district has averaged right at 3% EAV growth. And we've had some negative years in there. But over the last 20 years, we've experienced about 3%. We've left that flat in the calculation in order to be as conservative as possible with the bond. So what that results in, a $35 million based on current EAV, based on current interest rates, based on no estimated growth over the next 20 years, is a 94-cent per 100 assessed value tax increase, property tax increase, which would result on a $100,000 market value home an increase of $257 annually. On a $121,844 market value home, it would be $325 annually. The reason we use that number is because we tried to find that median number, and we found that at citydata.com. We actually found some as low as 114. We found some as high as 128, I think it was. And so we settled there because we thought that's a number that we should look at as well. But we also looked at the $200,000 home, and that was $570 annually. Now, what I'm telling people, again, when I come out, and I'm doing this on behalf of the Board of Education, the board is putting this proposition in front of the voters because they believe that this is a very good and healthy proposition for the community and the school district. But the board has not tried to diminish the cost. Because as you know, oftentimes what happens is people will stand up here and go, that's a cup of coffee a day. We've never done that. We've literally said this is the annual cost, this is the annual expense, and let the people do their own math as they wish. Farmland what I did is I called Tom Sweeney at the county assessor's office, and I actually asked him for average assessed value by township for tillable farmland. So can I get the assessed value of average assessed value by township? Because I thought it would be helpful to help our farmers if I could tell, they live in this township, here's the average for you guys. You live in this town, here's the average for you guys, and this is what it means. I could not get that information from him, but what he did give me is an average assessed value for the county. And when you do the math, what that equates to is a $3.58 increase per acre with the 94-cent increase. The average was $381 assessed value. The math on that is 381 divided by 100 because it's per 100, right? 381 divided by 100 times 0.94. So I met with the Farm Bureau on Monday night because we want the farmers to know the numbers. The focus, though, with this is, from the board's perspective, is how do we improve our facilities, our current facilities, and we can do that for $39 million, but we can't do that for $39 million without the taxpayers. We know that. We can't afford a one-site campus. This proposition does this and gives us the potential to get that capital construction money then that would finish up with a phase 2 and get us down to 2 campuses. And intentionally create a what we call future-ready schools. Not 21st century ready schools, because it's 2018. We're 20 years into the new century. So we're trying to create as much of a future ready. You can't project, obviously, everything, but this is a conceptual design that does not overbuild. It does not have overly sophisticated things like green roofs or single load hallways. It's meant to serve the current population. There is potential, if the community grows, great, they can build on. But we're not building with that in mind. There's no mentality that build it and they shall come. It's being built for the current population. We use our facilities, I will tell you, get used all day long, all night long. I mean, we have groups come in and use our gym spaces for a number of different reasons, whether it be Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts groups, club volleyball, travel basketball, travel baseball, soccer academy. They come in and we love it. We love having them there. This design here is, the conceptual design is made so that we could contain the 3rd through 5th grade students in one wing, away from the junior high students in another wing. And all the shared academic areas like the gym, the library, the art room. There's only one art room for this whole building, but for the most part we don't have an art room. I mean, you guys will tell us, it depends on the year. Sometimes the art teacher's on a cart, sometimes they have a room. Same thing for the music teacher. But that would be a shared space. This would be the common space here, but lunch hours would be organized so that students are, that's an issue with some people. I don't want my 3rd grader around 8th graders. This allows us to accommodate that. 3rd graders would go to lunch when the 6th graders do. They'd have separate eating areas. They'd be in the same vicinity. There'd be supervision, potentially 2 serveries. We currently serve in 4 buildings. We cook in one and we take it out to 4 buildings. This would be nothing for us to accommodate because we're already going to 4 buildings. In fact, we go to Malden and they come to us and buy the food. But so we're cooking out of one kitchen to serve 4 of our buildings. This would be from our standpoint, in terms of scheduling, this would be a very good thing. Plus, for night usage, they could use this part. They could use these entrances, these doors, these wings could be locked down. For school security purposes, these wings can be locked down. Much more sophisticated access to the building here in terms of surveillance and control for people coming in and out. And I don't want to get too detailed because, again, this is conceptual, but that's all that's the rationale that has, over 3 years, driven the board to put this proposition before our community. So I'll end with this. The goals, this is just a few of the goals that the board used to come to this point. Focus on students, today's learners. It's so different than when we were all kids, it just is. We didn't have the physical therapy in the schools. We didn't have the occupational therapy. We didn't have the Title I services to the extent we do now. We did not have the need for STEM labs and things like that. We didn't have computers. That's a real problem for us too, being able to accommodate the infrastructure that runs our network and things like that. Facility consolidation, fewer buildings. We still do a lot of busing as a result of our many campuses. Student safety is a huge priority, and I know it's a huge priority for our parents. Comfort, obviously, mechanical systems, AC improvements. Technology, I've already said. Community-centered, to keep that wing open to our community at night. Let the groups use it. And to literally build a solution that looks into the future. It is future ready. So, hopefully I haven't babbled too much and made it confusing, but I'd be glad to take some questions if that helps. Or Larry? I'm sorry, Lynn, you were going to facilitate. I apologize.
It's okay if you want to.
I'll let you do your job. Go ahead. I think she'll let you go a little, Larry.
Any projections of cost savings on more efficient utilization of staff?
Good question. So in terms of, I'll do it in two ways. In terms of staff, yes. Because the other thing with phase 1 and phase 2, if indeed we can get that state money like Peru did, and we're hopeful we're on the 2006 list, and someday they're going to have to fix roads and bridges and airports and schools, and that money will come. We just can't say for sure when. The sooner the better, obviously, because it will go further, because construction costs are continuing to climb every year, right? So the money they send, the sooner the better, because it's going to do more for us than not. But in terms of the two buildings, if indeed this is a 3rd through 8th grade building, you can do so much more, because licensure of teachers is so much more specific now than it ever was. It used to be that you can kind of cross over and teach this for a couple hours a day, even though it wasn't really your specialty. Not anymore. I mean, the licensure is very specific. So if we could get down over time to 2 facilities, that pre-kindergarten through 3rd grade facility is perfect for licensure. That's an early childhood building. The licensure is perfect. We can share. It keeps teachers from having, art teachers won't have to travel as much. Music teachers won't have to travel as much. Therapists won't have to travel as much. We'll look at, what I tell people is student population is what literally drives the need for staffing. And I've told people too that we have, and there's some staff in here, the board members that are here, we've been cutting staff as we can. Based on that, when we can, we cut. So that really student population is what drives those cuts, but efficiencies, absolutely. In terms of mechanicals and utility bills and things like that, our understanding is that basically what happens is when you go from the current buildings that we have to a facility that potentially is has air conditioning, it's kind of a break-even proposition. You hope you save, but because now you have mechanicals, air conditioning, that it's kind of a break-even on the utilities. So we don't want to, we're trying not to sell that as being the reason, because it's more driven towards, honestly, the students and the current learning environments and things like that, as it is huge savings that are going to occur because of mechanicals and things like that. We believe there will be, but we're not going to commit to that as being the reason a person should vote to that proposition.
Do you have any more questions? Yeah, great.
What's your estimate, like, if the bond referendum is passed, when would voters see that reflected in the property tax?
That's a great question. So potentially the veto session is in November. If we are able to pass this, what happens is, because when any school district builds a new building, any school district, it doesn't matter if you're New Trier with a huge amount of property value and things like that, to build a building, you have to go, most people don't pay cash, we can't, the school district either. You have to go literally beyond what is your debt limit to be able to capture the capital construction dollars. Well, that requires an act of legislation. Both Senator Weaver and Representative Swanson have agreed to sponsor that, but the rule of thumb is the local people have to agree to it first. So potentially what would happen is that if it passes, they would be able to, during the veto session, get that passed. If that happens, then we could literally levy, we could actually issue as early as late December to get us rolling. And the advantage to that is lower interest rates, and if we can issue bonds in smaller amounts, if in a calendar year you issue less than 10 million, they're considered bank qualified. There's more competition for those bonds. It really helps you over the long term financially. So it could be as early as next summer we would see it. It would be an incremental increase. It wouldn't be the entire 94 cents. It would only probably be on that 10 million, 15 million that we would issue initially to get the project started.
But we're probably looking at a 20-year plan anyway.
Absolutely. Now, to kind of go piggyback on that, let's say that in 10 years the money comes from the state and it is not enough to complete phase 2, okay? At that point in time, you either say to the state, we can't take the money, which nobody would do, or you take the money and you pay down your bonds. So let's say it came too late and now construction costs have gotten so high that we can't finish that project, it's not part of the proposition here, but it's in the planning, long-term planning of the district, then that board would likely take the money and just pay down the bonds. Do that.
Two issues. Construction costs. The numbers I've seen are if this doesn't pass and you got to do the construction on the current facilities, the price is going to get higher every year on construction costs. I saw a 3%.
You're right, 3 to 5 is what they say.
Actually, I've done some research on that one nationally, and I've seen the projections are actually significantly higher than that. So if you don't build new buildings, the cost for just maintaining them it's very reasonable. In the last month, I looked at the trends, and it's higher than 4%, could be 5% for construction costs, and that's not counting labor. So I just thought I'd mention that.
I appreciate that.
Your financials on this are very conservative. I mean, and it's great. Now, what happens if, is this a not to exceed?
It is.
So, I know we can't go around and say, hey, it could be a lot less. But is it possible that you could do this for less? Like sell the buildings rather than demolish them?
Well, if we had somebody come to us and want to buy the building, in other words, a really, truly,
Right.
true, sincere, financially capable developer, at that point, the board would have to work with legal counsel to do that, because in the question it says demolish. So that money would have to be abated back.
All right.
So let's say, to your question, that's a great question. Let's say that saves us $500,000 in demolition costs. Now you're down to $34.5 million. You can't take that money and use it otherwise, because that was for demolition.
Right. Well, anyway, that's possible. It seems to me there are alternatives. You've taken a very conservative approach on the cost and reasonable. You're not promising what you can't deliver, it seems to me. But what happens if a philanthropist comes along and says, I'm going to give you $1 million?
Again, if it was used, dependent upon what, if the philanthropist said, I want it to go towards construction costs, if they said, I want it to be for the library, and it would probably be used to buy furniture, buy equipment, that kind of thing. But then again, it would still go against the bond.
Yeah.
Total. I mean, ideally, it's 35 million. We're saying 35 million. It's not to exceed, like you said, Rich. But the potential to come in lower than that, absolutely. And it would be you bond. That's why we bond incrementally too.
Right.
You get down to that last bond, it's like, listen, we're coming in lower than we anticipated. We don't have to bond for the entire. Then that's what the board would do, because you can't over bond and then, because there's not going to be anything legally you can go spend those dollars on. Now, granted, there'll be a little bit. Hopefully, there'll be a window of money that's up in reserve, because you've got those issues that come up over that first year that you have to have the contractors go back and address, like a home or anything. But, because this is the other thing I tell people too. If it's a brand new building, you know how it is. You walk into it, it's like, man, I wish we would have done that different. It happens. We're just wanting to be realistic to people. I built my own home. I had a contractor build it. They put one of the windows under the deck for the basement. So, and nobody realized that. They've been building homes for a number of years. Now, those are the things obviously the mistakes you want to make, but there would be some contingency funding that would have to obviously be left after the construction to go address issues like that.
But that's part of the 35.
But it's built in, yes. But it is definitely a not to exceed.
Good job, Tim.
Thanks, Dick. Thanks, Dick. That's busy. I'm with you.
Very good. Is there-
Sure, I have another question. I'm sure you have enrollment projections for the future, so it's sort of a three-part starter here. I guess, what are those projections? How much of this existing building, when it comes online, would be utilized, and how much is for future use, I guess? And the third part, I guess, is when would the building?
That's a great question too. I'm glad you bring these up.
All three of them.
Absolutely. So we're kind of projecting enrollment right now flat. We feel like we've kind of bottomed out and we're staying pretty consistent. And so what we did is we built for now, with no growth anticipated. But if there were growth, so we currently have 5 sections at every grade level. So we built for 5 sections. But what this does is if there is indeed a boom or something like that, let's say we need a 6th section of like every grade level. This corridor that goes around the 3rd, 4th, 5th grade building, it goes all the way around, but there's a cut-through hallway here halfway. That's a egress safety thing. This is actually an exit here. There could be classrooms there'd be a small hallway, and there'd be maybe 4 classrooms or 5 classrooms built out here. Same thing down here. So they have that understanding that if that were to happen, where would they go? They've got that understanding it would go to the north, actually. This is south facing, because they want the front of the building facing south for snow melt in the Midwest. So they would have to build out here in this area to kind of make it, work with the other facilities.
So I guess what I'm hearing then, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that when this building comes online, it basically would fulfill the need now.
For us, right now. Yeah, we didn't want to, because of the price tag that was associated with trying to, accommodate future growth, it was going north too fast on it. To answer your question, the goal is to potentially build the building as early as fall of 2020, so August of 2020. And part of that is because this construction here, there is a considerable amount of it that would be precast, which is a savings as well. Precast, I mean, you'll talk to some older people and they'll be like, precast, junk. It's not. It's been perfected. It's much more so than what people probably understand. It's a huge savings. It's what a lot of the commercial buildings are doing in all the cities. Saves you money. You don't have all the huge costs associated or with time and so forth. It's both our construction manager and our architect believe that it is very, it's a very good plan. Hall High School, if you go by Hall High School, same thing, for Parkside. I mean, there is a considerable amount of precast on those buildings.
It's a pretty tight
Window, it sure is. I know, I'm like, really? I'm through, that'd be great. I agree, wow, that's fast. So, but they believe that this site contributes to that. They believe that this site is very conducive to this type of construction and believe that it enhances the timeline too.
Now, I'm not seeing outdoor athletic
Correct.
facility. So
There'd be
that-
playgrounds. There would be playgrounds, playgrounds here, actually, over in these areas. There would be potential to build, there's playground here, actually here. Again, it's conceptual. There could be play fields out here.
Is the brown area to the south, is that part of this parcel?
It is, actually, this whole brown area this is Liberty Village, and so there's, in the interest of being good neighbors, just to try to create enough of a barrier for them. You know.
Why all that? The,
Here,
yeah,
so the landowner would not subdivide, because they, obviously, they didn't feel it was where the building was gonna go for them to come around and get to this 22 acres was not to them usable, or made good sense to them. We like it because, again, we can control that stormwater, we feel like. We can do a really good job with the engineers of keeping that stormwater back and filtering it with this alfalfa field. Like I said, this would be cash rented to somebody that's interested in doing that. Larry?
What is the cost of the demolition? Well, let me back up. How much money are you anticipating from the capital fund to take care of the remaining demolitions in the second phase and the addition to Jefferson? What's the cost of demolition, and what's the cost of the enhanced security that you've got to put into this building that 10 years ago we never really talked about?
Into the new building,
Yeah.
the enhanced security. So all that is built in, that's part of the ballot question. So, but the demolitions are surprisingly, I thought they'd be much higher. It varies based on the building and the amount of asbestos that's in it. But those range, I believe, and I did not bring, I apologize, and I can get that to you, Larry, but I believe it was a range of anywhere from $300,000 for Lincoln up to like $600,000 for Logan, in terms of demolition. In terms of surveillance, we currently have surveillance in our buildings, but it's pretty much just at the front door. So we don't have very good surveillance compared to most school districts, but we've been doing the planning for 3 years, so we've been really careful about not spending money on those areas, because we want the voters to be able to have a chance to say yay or nay first. Because obviously November 6th will be a major communication tool to our board to say, okay, here's what it was. This many said yes, this many said no, or this many said, what's the difference, what's the discrepancy, what's that mean? You know, how do we plan going forward that, you know, whether it's a yes or no, it'll help drive future decisions of the board and the district. In terms of surveillance, in a new building, it's way more affordable to put it in a brand new building, obviously, than it is an older building. That's a problem we have. You probably have it in your own homes, is wireless access points and things like that. We're constantly sticking them up in different places in the building to try to get technology that works. Because much of our testing's online now, and when you've got 230 kids trying to take a test at the same time on a computer, if your internet goes down, it's a problem, and it does. You know, it does. We do our best, and the state's understanding of that for the most part, but it's not fair to the kid. Their performance obviously is going to be affected by that. So, interestingly enough, I'm glad you brought the surveillance and stuff like that, because technology. This does not have a computer lab, because we're going one-to-one now with kids. Every kid's going to have virtually their own device, because the devices have come down in cost to. We used to buy a PC for about $1,000. Now we're buying Chromebooks for like $210. So we can. It's just, again, and that's a savings. So we don't need technology labs anymore. They just take the devices right into their classroom. But without the proper infrastructure to run those devices, it's a problem. And in the older buildings, it doesn't run as well, obviously.
Part of what I was getting to, because I used the word security, not surveillance. Are the windows in this building bullet resistant?
No, the entrances are. You mean the classroom windows?
Yeah.
In terms of like bulletproof?
I said resistant, not proof.
Okay. Resistant, yes. Proof, no. The entryways themselves are much more resistant. They're built to, again, it buys you time, is what it does. They're built to make it more difficult for a person to penetrate through that window or door.
Hate to talk about it, but that's the world we are in this world.
Yep.
No, you're right. And that's a big piece of this too, and I know it's a huge piece for our parents and many grandparents in fact. That's on my mind, honestly and truthfully, every single day. It really is. I hear sirens, and I just hope they're not going to one of my buildings. Whether it's an ambulance, fire truck, or anything.
It's probably unfair to ask, but as you go in the community, what are the most common misconceptions you're hearing, and how do you respond to them?
You know, and maybe you guys can help answer that too in terms of what you're hearing, a couple board members that are here, but I would say it's probably there's nothing wrong with these buildings. What's wrong? You know, these buildings aren't that bad, or and we're not saying they're crumbling. We're not. That's not the message here. In fact, Steve Oslog, who's here today at a board meeting, said we don't want to give misrepresentation to this at all. We're not saying our buildings are crumbling at all. We're saying we're at a time here where we need to talk about the future of our district and so forth. So I think it's that. It's like, what's wrong with the buildings? Yeah, they look fine to me.
I think, Tim, I can add one.
Kim?
I was going to ask, why would you need to put air conditioning in the new buildings? Because we didn't have it, we survived just fine.
And that's it. You're right, I have heard that one. And so, again, because the board has talked about that. You want to answer it?
No, go ahead.
Okay,
You're doing a
so
great job.
seriously, the Board of Education could give this talk. I really mean that, because we've been talking about it so much, and Kim's been at virtually every meeting. So, thankfully. And many of you have asked these questions and been very, very helpful, because it does help to get asked questions, because it
The
helps
answer is,
you.
it really stinks.
It's tough.
But
So-
back then, we went to a house that had no air conditioning.
There you go, Chris, that's the answer.
We were
That's the answer.
acclimated.
That's the
They're
answer.
not acclimated.
That's the answer. That is it. These kids, we all grew up in homes without air conditioning. We all got in cars that didn't have air conditioning. So when we got to school, we didn't know any different. The problem is now, I don't have to answer, you just did. They just don't respond. It's,
Also, when we went to school, we didn't start in the middle of August.
good point.
Oh, that's true.
Man, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Jessica?
Two questions. One, I think with the AC, as I've seen today, this year with our child in the school system, and in previous years, you guys let out early for heat. So when you let out early for heat, what's the effect of that? The lost time and the...
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked that question. Probably anywhere from 1 to 2 days